Morning to you, how are you?
Good morning, Chair. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Before we talk about Conor Murray and just how important a moment it is in his career, I did want to just get your temperature on where we are at the moment. Jacques Nienaber was on out talking to the media in South Africa, saying it's really important for rugby that it goes ahead and for the country. And we had a South African journalist on last night saying this will be a bit of a distraction for the people of South Africa. At the same time, we're seeing fairly horrific accounts of the impact that COVID is having in Johannesburg with the absence of hotel beds at this point. So, they're going through some of the stuff that we went through when we cancelled sport and when we continued to play sport while very difficult situations were raging.
Yeah, look, I think the morals on it are almost complicated, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, but they're going through what we went through at different times over the last 15, 16 months, where there's a high level of fear, where you are trying to make certain everybody stays safe, where you want to ensure that there's enough hospital beds, where there is a consideration that everybody's in it together. So I think it becomes a little bit difficult. And I remember we were talking about this a couple of months ago. The Lions players all got vaccinated at around the same time, where everybody was being vaccinated within the UK. So I don't think that there's that sense within it. But there is that sense in South Africa, because so few people in such a tiny percentage have actually been vaccinated, that you see elite sport getting it ahead of them. So that causes a little bit of a problem about the equity of the whole thing. There is also an essential element to, I'm not going to say entertainment, but I'm going to say to life in general, where you do need something to try and keep your mind away from it. And I think they're striking a balance between that. And of course, the third part then is the financial ramifications. And they're the ones that, for everybody who is railing against this, are the ones that make no sense whatsoever, that you can't have financial imperatives put in place of moral issues. I don't know where I sit on it. I think it's somewhere in between them, actually. There are a couple of logistical issues too that happen, and I don't quite know what the full logistics of the Lions, and I'm sure Gatland and his crew and everybody have been building and working on this. But to stay in a bubble for 6 weeks is going to be incredibly difficult, as tight a bubble as has been mooted. But also there is the situation that what happens if you have to go to hospital? You know, if a player gets injured, has to go for surgery, if he needs to get a scan, how are they all done in the level of still keeping that bubble sacrosanct? And we've seen through sport over the last number of months that the best laid plans fall apart from time to time. So I think it's incredibly challenging. I'm still confused as to whether, I mean, for me, I had felt fairly early that this tour should have been postponed for 4 years, which would be horrendous for everybody. But this is a once in 100-year pandemic, and sometimes you have to make those decisions. But the Lions have made different decisions, and South Africa, and they've made decisions that they believe they can stand and hold up to. I hope they do, actually, and I hope that standard of bubble that they're able to keep is good enough to keep everybody safe, and hopefully good enough to help lift people out of the gloom, because we've been in a sense of gloom for this for a long, long time.
Yeah, okay. One last question then. A UK or an Ireland-based tour where they come here, that was never really an option in your mind, just because that's not the whole point of the Lions? Was that it?
Yeah, I think you could have done it, but when those conversations were happening, we had no certainty for where we were. And I don't want at any stage to go and speak in hindsight in terms of this, because these things change day by day. We look at the announcement yesterday. The government has delayed the opening of hospitality again, because you're trying to deal with information in real time. So I think it becomes incredibly hard to make decisions, and you're going to get castigated for anyone that happens, which is why I'm not, because I think people are trying to make decisions with the information that they have at their disposal at any moment in time. the difficulty is that the circumstances are changing every few weeks.
Yeah, like that's the hindsight decision, Keith, isn't it? Like, I mean, right now, if you could turn back the clocks, you would have it in Ireland or in Britain, but you can't do that.
Well, you can't do that because we just didn't quite know whether there was going to be another wave and another wave, or whether there was going to be a different variant that would come out that would be resistant to vaccines. And I think for me, that was the reason to not do it. But I didn't have commercial skin in the game either, so it was easy for me to say delay it by 4 years. And like, how pissed off would all the players be if they don't get a chance to go? But look, I think it puts everybody in a very tough position. I was listening again to South Africa saying that if this Lions tour were to not go ahead, that could be the end of the Springboks, and that financially they are on a cliff edge. And we had that with Philip Brown 12 months ago when we discussed him on the State of the Union, that it was existential, and I still believe it is. I think there's many people spinning plates trying to keep a lot of sport and society alive. So it's, and we have to, we're just part of society. We're not any more special than it. So
yeah, fingers crossed everything can happen safely and the bubble remains secure and no further outbreak in the South African squad as well. Let's move on and talk about the rugby and park that conversation, because it's going to be an ongoing conversation, I think, right up until the Lions come home. Conor Murray, a captain, tell us about this. What does it mean for his part of Limerick, for your part of Limerick, for his career? It was a bit of a left field choice, it seems. In retrospect, it makes a lot of sense.
I think it's a total left field choice, and we discussed it immediately when we heard Alan Jones got injured in post-match discussion. I named 3 other people. I didn't name him at all. And I look, it's brilliant, actually. Brilliant for Gary Owen, brilliant for St. Munchin's, our school. He is a guy that came a bit late to. It's funny because he played for school. He took him a while to get on the team. Took him a while to get on other teams, and he seems to have been around forever since. It's his third Lions tour. He's a pretty calm guy. I would say some of the decision behind him being picked would have been through the difficulty I think he's had in the last couple of years from having an injury, from having a lot of flack in the media or on social media, a lot of criticism of whether he should be playing or not playing. And there was times at that time when he played very poorly. And I think he's been coming back and getting better, and I think he's having more confidence in his neck and shoulder where he was injured. And in the last 4 months or so, I think he's actually getting back to if not quite at his best, at a very high standard and at a level of assurity that I think he'd lost, and I think he has it back. So when you go through that hard, tough grind, you come out of it with a little bit more in the bank too. And I think it also highlights or outlines that Gatland thinks he's starting 9. And that's a great confidence boost to him. I've been interested listening to some of the noises, and you have to read through these things when you're on tour. Nobody's going to say anything bad about you. But I've liked it from different players, from Jamie George talking about the relationships that they'd picked up on the previous tour, that there was a kind of warm feeling for the fact that one of the younger guys on the previous tours, and he wasn't that young, but one of the younger guys was now top of the tree, and they're giving him a lot of slagging and banter over it, but there seems to be a high level of affection towards him and respect, and that's what's required for a Lions captain.
And that's the type of stuff that we don't really have a clue about, that's private between the people who are there soldiering in the field.
Well, I think if we were to say with comfort, I know Conor, I can't say I know him very well, but there is a high level of camaraderie towards him, and there's a huge level of respect towards him as a player. And players know what he can do, what he has done, what he's delivered on in the past. So the next step is to whether he has the captaincy capabilities. And one thing that I think we gloss over a little bit from time to time is captaincy is adhering to a culture, being the leading sense of that culture, and combining as many leaders as you possibly can within a team. So it isn't about making every single decision on the field. It is absolutely not about that. And he just needs to do what he's doing, because he is one of the leaders on the field anyway at playing at 9. He has a huge impact on the game, and he needs to be able to take in additional information from other people around him and get them to follow him. And from all the noises so far, that doesn't seem to be much a stretch for them because of the respect that's there.
Is he a future Ireland captain?
Well, it'll see how he gets on, but of course he is. If this is something that strikes a chord with him, I don't know that he ever thought of being captain. It's a bit of a scary place to be, actually, because you come in for an awful lot of the flack. But he's used to a bit of flack for the last while. So, I mean, if he wears it easily, why not?
Yeah, and we were asking the question, did we miss this a little bit? Were we unaware of his potential? Sometimes it takes somebody from outside the camp to go, you guys have got this amazing leader right here, and you just need to elevate him a little bit.
Yeah, and that can often be the case, and sometimes you just need a chance. And it's like selection, actually. Some coaches like certain players, other coaches like other players. So if you look at England at the present moment in time, and some of the players that they have at their beck and call, and they don't pick them at all, and many other teams would just glory in the fact of putting them onto the field. Just Eddie Jones, it doesn't suit his style of play. It doesn't suit what he wants to do or see in the players that he has. That's his job as coach, but he could be wrong.
There's other things that are kind of the aftermath of the game at the weekend in terms of the style of play and how long it's going to take the team to gel. It was a good first outing, a really good opportunity for that Celtic group to get out and establish, actually, you know what, I've done very well here. We've got a win under our belts. You were talking about the nervousness, I think, before the very first game on the tour, and making sure that the whole atmosphere was set properly in the past. And it's like there's a very short window here. This tour is going to be over in terms of these players' careers. It's going to be over in the blink of an eye. So all of a sudden, if you played well last weekend, that's a massive bonus for you in terms of selection, in terms of your motivation going forward, and just in terms of training sessions, all that kind of stuff, right?
I don't think anybody played badly last weekend. I don't think the Lions set the world alight either last weekend. A couple of guys played well enough to put their hands up. I find it very hard to read that much into that game. It's like a scratch Lions team, almost like a Barbarians team to play, but without playing with the Barbarian spirit. There's a freedom to playing for the Barbarians because it doesn't matter a damn if you win or lose. That's not the case with the Lions. And I'm trying not to get too excited at the very start of the tour, because we'll run out of superlatives in about 2 weeks if we do. And this is, even though it's a short tour, there are 3 big tests at the end, and it's all been geared towards that idea. So Gatland has said he's going to pick every player to play in the first 3 matches. That may not happen because you could get a couple of injuries and guys don't get a run. Everything has been squeezed, so there's a rush to try and get players to play very well. So if we were to say what's the game plan that the Lions would play based on what we saw last Saturday, I think you'd come a cropper very quickly. I thought that was a group of players who said, let's play the most simplistic thing and let's do it well. Let's have a really good defence. I was happy with a lot of their defence, and they got beaten on the outside. And I thought defensively, the Lions looked very uncertain in the outside channels. That was the only area that worried me in defence, but the rest of it was excellent. But I don't think they showed a huge amount. And you get your chance, you play well. Training becomes infinitely more important than what happens on the early Saturdays, I think, or the early matches. I think that, for me, is important. I think the quality with which people are turning up to train, the standard that they're bringing, the sense of understanding of what the Lions is about, is more important than the early matches.
There was one other thing I wanted to talk to you about before we head off. It's one of your former clubs, Harlequins, at the weekend, producing a performance that has been described as an all-time classic in beating the Exeter Chiefs. I mean, the turnaround in Quins' fortunes from the start of the year, where Paul Gustard is gone and you're not quite sure what's going to happen next, to this bit where all of a sudden they are playing barbarian-style rugby, and the semi-final and final back-to-back, it seems like it's completely remarkable. A lot of people won't have seen this. So what has happened?
Well, for all intents and purposes, what seems to have happened is that Gustard was dictatorial. And this is the way I want to play, and want to play incredibly defensive and build it on the defence, and not put as much time towards attack. And I played for Quins for seven seasons. Quins were known predominantly as a cup team, an ability to set the world alight in April, May, June, right? That was their April and May, I suppose, in the times I was playing. And they were flash. Well, actually, I think Gustard did a really good job defensively, because the defence has been very good, very strong. But without that dictatorial view on it, it seems like the players and the coaching staff have said, this isn't really who we are. This is a false philosophy. Let's be who we think we are, which is, with Danny Kerr, like there's been mavericks in Quins forever, but in the last 10 years you've had Marler, Danny Kerr and Mike Brown, who do things their own way. I think that's the easiest way. And I think there's a high level of player rebellion in terms of how they play. And they, from being sixth or eighth, from being eighth at the time Gustard left, they lost a couple of matches afterwards. And then they went on a running and a winning streak. And during that streak, they gained confidence in themselves. They have the most magnificent out half. So my kids all play 9 or 10. And I say, look at Marcus Smith. Look at the way he tackles a big guy. Look at his pace and his I can't call it power, but his skills with the ball in hand are fantastic. But normally that's considered... there's going to be a flip side to that you'll be poor defensively, and he's not. He sprints up into the line and he tackles the huge guys. He doesn't tackle them head on, he tackles them on the side. Technically fantastic. He has a big goose step, which he uses constantly, and he has the freedom of youth that
22.
22, but he looks, and he's played senior rugby for 4 years. He looks like a maverick because of some of the things he does. But he isn't. His goal kicking is peerless. As I said, his defence. So he's not flaky. He just has an unbelievable skill set. He's not a big man. And he plays with the freedom that he is allowed to play. And that's one of the parts now for me that I find very striking. Added to that, we have one of my next door neighbours, the Linus, the next generation, Michael Lina's son, playing on the wing.
Is he good?
He is good. He's quick. He's powerful. He's interesting. He made a couple of mistakes in the first half and made a couple of mistakes in the second half. And you know that could shatter a young fella, 21 years of age. It could shatter his confidence. He finished stronger than any other player on the field. Scored 2 tries in the last 7 or 8 minutes. Tough tries, but well done, really well positioned ball into contact, or into the tackle, so that they make certain he can get it down in the corner. They were just fantastic. But it was the ebb and flow of the game which was amazing. I thought it was extraordinary. I've actually loved watching the Premiership this year. I have been in favour of ring fencing, and they have brought in a type of that this year. I've always been in favour of it. I wrote an article about 22 or 3 years ago in relation to it, because very few teams were geared up to be at that top level, and the 1 in 12 chance of disappearing into oblivion was a limiting factor. So I thought it was an incredible advertisement for a game that has been, for a league that's been a bit stodgy for the last few years.
It's a transformative moment for the league, and unfortunately it seems like England in their future have a 22-year-old wunderkind at number 10. We could do one of those. Maybe we have one. Keith, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Pleasure. Cheers, gents.